And today I'm going to present one of the work that it's not mine, but it's really related to what I'm trying to do as an intern in CAMELs, and it's about tool-augmented language models for scientific reasoning. And yeah, so let's start. So this is done by one of the people um in I remember it's like by Yubo Ma and Go Zhibing, and it was shown in one of the EMNLP 2024. So yeah. So there's a lot of challenges in scientific reasoning. So by scientific reasoning, what I'm trying to say is that let's say we have a science problem. So everyone did their science homework back in like middle school, and there are going to be a lot of questions related to math, sometimes related to key idea we're trying to do now is about scientific reasoning. But there's a lot of problem with scientific reasoning. So for example, when I was a kid, when we were trying to do a lot of like physics and chemistry homework, there are actually more than one knowledge that you need to know. So first of all, you need to have like this kind of domain expertise. So domain knowledge of you understand what you're trying to talk about. So for example, in the physics, you understand what you're trying to about like Hooke's law. You know what about like Coulomb laws, but most importantly, you also need a mathematical reasoning. And in modern world, LLM often struggle to learn both tasks at the same time. So for instance, the advanced models such as like GPT-4 and like even more advanced models recently published has a limited accuracies on these kind of like science benchmark. So basically, it shows that it's really hard to like take two of the top two of the like domain expertise and mathematical reasoning and mingle them together as an LLM. And the traditional approach is basically just say, oh, let's do fine tuning. Let's take a bunch of annotated scientific problems by some human experts. We write it, we feed it to LLM, trying to adjust their weight by either like, low rank approximations or just like do other way of approximations. And we fine tune the model so that it can answer the question for us. But the problem here is that first you need a lot of experts to write your data, which is very much not going to be the case. And also, this is going to require a lot of money. And so overall, it's very inefficient doing this. So the paper presented a new way of doing scientific reasoning, which is called tool-augmented scientific reasoning. So the whole idea is that, well, how does human learn how to like do the work, right? So of course, you still need to learn basic scientific knowledge. You have to know about basic domain knowledge, but most importantly, you know how to use the tools to solve like specific problem. So for example, let's say you already know that there's some libraries or there's some like functions dedicated to solve like, I don't know, Coulomb's law, then instead of just memorizing like how it works, you just learn to use the tools and get the answer out of it. This approach is very much like generic, such that it doesn't have to be like specific, it doesn't have to be specific domain. It can be like multiple domains. As long as you know how to use the tool, you're done. So basically, the whole idea was to not make an LLM to learn as if it is an omniscient solver, which means that they know everything, which is very much impractical. You ask LLM to learn how to use tools that is given to them. And there are a lot of benefits because of that. For example, all of these toolkits are actually reusable. So we can summarize a little like database of toolkits, which I know like CAMEL-AI is already doing so. And if that's the case, then we don't need to do a lot of fine tuning anymore. Like we just need to learn how to use specific like tools from specific ways. So like it's about retrieval, not about fine tuning. And we think this is a very promising path to modern reasonings, and especially not just math reasoning, but also like with math but plus some domain knowledge. So it's like brief picture shown in the papers. So on the left hand side, it's about LLM doing fine tuning for domain specific task. So for any time you need to touch the weight, you need to retrain the models with respect to the certain samples, and then you get the corresponding model for that. But on the right way is the tool using that this paper is trying to present, which means the model only needs to learn how to use tools and plus some basic mathematical reasoning ability. But then it can generalize to any other domains, for example, like physics, like computer science, even like chemistry, and like even like finance. So anything that as long as you give them a tool for that, they learn how to use it. And yeah, that was the whole idea of the paper, essentially. So there are actually like three contributions for this paper. So first, they came up with a training corpus, which is called MathFunk. Essentially speaking, what they're trying to do is they're trying to take a lot of like samples for questions, like sample solutions and the way they like conduct. But most importantly, they also come up with a 6,000 amount of tools such that the model can learn at what specific instances to use which tools in order to solve the problem correctly. And next, after they trained the corpus, they developed a new agent model, which is called SCIAGENT. We're going to introduce later. But essentially speaking, the overall idea is the model was first starting to plan how to solve the problem. And then they will also plan which tools to use, and then they will retrieve the corresponding tools from the database of tools that we provided to them. Finally, after getting the tools, they write in the code using the tools they retrieve, and then finally get the answer out of it. So bear in mind, in the whole paper, when we talk about tools or toolkits, we're talking about Python functions. And of course, it's not just like limited to Python function. It can be anything actually. But for the sake of clarity, that's what we're talking about now. Finally, this paper presented something called a sci tool bench. So essentially speaking, they gather 5 different scientific domains. There's math, there's physics, there's like finance, there's EECS, and essentially they generates a benchmark so that people from like later on the researchers can test on the same datasets and test the abilities of how they can use the tool. I'm doing great on time. Yeah, I'm doing great on time. Awesome. Okay, so let's start with the first MathFunk, which is the training corpus that it generates. I'm going to give you a brief overview here, and I'm going to explain details later in the next slides. So what they're trying to do is first, they are going to come up with their own tool planning and their own tool set. So in this paper, the tool set they're constructed is actually constructed by on the fly. So essentially, when they're trying to make let's say you're trying to answer a math problem, which is from the math data sets, what they're trying to do is they're going to take a math problem, they're going to ask LLM or like try to come up with the function that is generic enough to solve this problem, but also can be used to solve other problems. So it has to be a generic functions. And yeah, and then they will generate solutions using LLM, using this something called like cross retrieval strategy, which we're going to come over later. And basically, it's more like a training way of letting LLM knows how to get the corresponding functions or the tools that can be used to solve this specific task. And then like you generate solutions based on code executions. So finally, once you get solutions, you basically store everything as a tuples, and that's your training corpus. So this is like a brief overview of how everything's how like whole pipeline is working. So we start by the left bottom, where let's say we have a question which is distance between. You want to find the distance between some foci of the hyperbola. And the way we do is first, you always start with planning by letting LLM know what exact function you need to do. So here you have you want to have a hyperbola foci distance. And bear in mind that there's a lot of cases where the paper responded, the paper was like explaining such that because you generate your tools based on the question you get, for a lot of times, the function you generate are actually specifically designed to answer this exact question. So for example, If everyone can see this like a little red face here, which is like unhappy. The reason why it's unhappy is because the function they generated fxy is actually specifically designed for solving fx the exact questions, which is fxy equals to y squared like over 16 or 18-ish. And but that tool can be only used to solve, which is we call ad hoc, and it's not desired because, well, you can't really use them to generalize to other problems. Instead, what function that they want is something called like hyperbola Fauci distance, which is general enough so that if you see another question which is really similar to this but like changing the number, you can still directly use the tool and get an answer for it. Okay. And to avoid this kind of retrieval of the exact same question you had, they introduced something called cross retrieval, which basically means that when you retrieve the corresponding function, so like once you add your generated function into the like big function database, you have to retrieve it from them. And for a lot of cases, you will retrieve the same function that you just wrote. That's something you don't want to do. So that's what cross retrieval is about. You like basically you do not retrieve the same function you just wrote, you just written before. After you do that, you generate your solutions by interleaving the mathematical reasoning and function calling. And then you generate the answer because after that. So that's like whole math func construction. Yeah, also like I might be mistaken sometimes, but just like let me know when I made a mistake. But yeah, that's overall. So the second, yeah,
Can I ask a question here?
sure.
So the generative function is used to solve the problem, or is only used for retrieval?
So right now they're like trying to do a syntactic data generations, and the generate function is to serve as one of the data points that in the data, and it will be retrievable later by the other function, which is other like question, which is sharing the like similar similar topic, for example.
Okay, I see.
Because the reason why they're doing they're doing like a cross retrieval, and they're trying to masking out the current function they're having is because otherwise this is going to be trivial. Like we just generate their own function. It's like it's not going to be different than like a easy code agent where you just like generate the function, execute the function, and get your answer for. So this is to ensure that the function generates are general enough so that it can be used later by the other math problem.
I see.
Okay. So that's good. Okay. So after the corpus is trained, we get there's a new way. Is that all right?
Someone in the chat asked, can you go across the chat? That's the question quickly.
Maybe I'll do it later.
Okay, sure,
Yeah, I'll just finish everything. Okay. Sure. Okay. So the second contribution of this paper is they generate a tool-augmented language model, which is called SCIAGENT. And the raw idea is really simple. You do initially you start by planning the way of how to solve each problem for each questions, and then you want the model to explicitly state that what kind of toolkits you need to use. Second step, you do retrieval. It's more like a vector retrieval where you find the very much related functions to your questions from the tools that they generated or they provided. After that, it's the same kind of ideas. You generate some solutions by interleaving the tool callings and the mathematical reasoning. Finally, you do the execution, get a program, run the program, and get your final answer. So it's really like it's really ensemble the way they use to generate the math func in the training set. So let's go over the example here. Let's say one of the question is about like physics about light. I'm not gonna repeat it here, but essentially speaking, the first step is always to do planning, where the model would know that what law they're trying to calculate or like what other function they're trying to use. After that, they're going to do retrieval by getting from the planning and from the questions to find the corresponding functions inside the toolkit. So let's see here, we need something called like modulus law for intensity. And well, in toolset, there is something called modulus law intensity. So they can directly retrieve the functions and they can use it to directly calculate the results without being reasoning inside the function. Finally, during the actions, everything can be generated in a code format where all the mathematical reasoning are labeled as the comments, and a code is actually a code. And the one interesting here is that all they need to do is to calculate I1, I2, which is something called like modulus law intensity, and all they need to do is to get a retrieved function, computes, and get a return result for it. So it's more like So it's more like how to combine. You can't really for this kind of function you can't really realize everything on mathematical reasoning because they're gonna make a mistake. You also cannot realize everything by just expecting that there's this function that solves you all the problem. It's more like how you combine both approach so that you get integrated solutions. Oh, good. So far, so good. Okay, for any more questions that we're gonna answer like later after the Q&A session. So, because I know Roman told me someone is asking a question. Okay, so finally, the third contribution of the paper is they propose a benchmark called a SciTool bench. It's not about school, it's SciTool. And basically what they're doing is they take the existing data sets and they do a lot of either manual checkings or synthetic data generations so that they make sure all the questions are like first divided into different 5 domains. And then the second, they will always use at least 1.5. Our average is 1.5 function need to be used to solve each question. So this is a benchmark to show that how your model can successfully use the tools that they provided to answer the question efficiently. And all the tools provided are checked to be generalized enough so that there won't be any ad hoc function designed to solve a specific problem in the benchmark. And they carry out some experiment results, and I highlight three of the big numbers that I think is really interesting to share. So the first one is that we actually have a study saying that if your open source model LM use toolset, compared to those who are not using toolsets, you get actually almost 62% of accuracy improvement, relative accuracy improvement. And then we think this is a lot because, well, this also like makes sense to us since, well, if you have a toolset and the toolset are designed to solve the specific math problem, then, well, you don't need to worry about the accuracy between the tools if you given that the tools is correct, of course, which will alleviate a lot of like resources for LLM to do mathematical reasoning instead of just doing actual calculations. And then we think this is really a way to go for the further like math or science agent solving agent way of doing this. Yes. Sorry. The second highlight I want to say is that so the experiments that using the SciAgent way of answering scientific problems, they fine tunes over a pre-trained deep math 7B using the mathfunk corpus, and then they actually outperform ChatGPT a lot, and they show the comparable results to GPT-4, which we think is also very interesting because, well, this shows that for a specific type of a problem, you can actually achieve like this closed source LLM by using the correct tools. So finally, we have a 5.5% due to the compared to the fine-tuned model. So you remember, like in the very first pages where we talk about fine-tuning versus tool using. So it's not just about different paradigm. Here we also shows that they also shows that if you use tools, it's actually better. You actually achieve a better accuracy compared to the fine-tuned models, which render this fine-tuned model obsolete because, well, what's the use of that if you spend a lot of money and didn't get a lot of didn't get the performance boost? And furthermore, to get a more insight of how tool using is working, they carried a lot of ablation study. And there are 4 things that I want to highlight, or they want to highlight as well. The first of all is the importance of doing planning module. So I remember when I keep talking about MathFunk has a planning module to begin with. Also in the SCIAGENT, they also have a planning module to begin. So planning module is actually very much useful because they will explicitly tell the LLM what query you are using in order to get a corresponding retrieval. So yeah, going back to the column laws examples, you need to say that specifically that, okay, I need functions to call column law, or I will compute column law now, and then using this as a query to get the corresponding retrieval during the retrieval part, so that you actually get higher accuracy to find the correct tools. The second one is called cross retrieval, which we just mentioned about it. The strategy is very much essential because you cannot get this like overly specialized function into your data sets, because that's not going to be anyway useful apart from answering the specific question you're having. The third topic that we want to highlight is that there are a lot of math-related samples inside. So also, like, math is also one of the 5 topics provided in the SciToolBench. And it actually shows that LLM's mathematical reasoning is very much important in answer all kind of science problem. So I think in the experiments it shows if you, because like you can use different kind of LLM as pre-trained LLM as your starting point, and if you choose those who are already pre-trained on some math problem, then you actually get a lot of performance increase compared to those who are not trained before. And finally, they designed their own like dense retrieval modules, which to get corresponding tool sets, and that was like very much essential. If you remove that, there's no way you can do it with a simple retrieval like rule-based method. So after we talk about how good the paper is, they mentioned some limitation, and there's also some limitation that I think when I was reading it, I think I need to share about it. So for example, here, all the toolkit it generates are they're generated actually from the benchmark questions, which that's the reason why they have this kind of like ad hoc problem where the function can actually generate it to be very much specialized to solving one particular problem. And I think this might be an issue because, well, first of all, you can't just take your training set and generate the tools and then use the tools in your testing. You can't take the tools in the testing set and generate the tool and then use it again in the testing set. So that I don't think that's a way of doing it. So in the paper, they claim that they already solved these problems by manually check over the data, and they already manually remove a lot of tools. But to me, I feel like if we were to continue working on it, for example, if we were going to integrate these kind of modules in CAMEL, I think instead of generating the tools from the data, I think it's better to find other sources. So for example, right now CAMEL have a SymPy toolkit, and also there are a lot of other toolkits that's specifically designed for solving math problem, which is the thing research project I'm working on. This way we're making sure that we know what exactly the tools that we're having, and we know that it's not being leaked by the datasets. And the second problem, as I just mentioned, is about ad hoc tool generation. The same can be avoided by using a predefined toolkits. And the third idea is also basically solvable, in the sense that, well, the function or the tool it generates are not guaranteed to be true because they are LM generated. You don't really have a proof that the functions will already generate the desired results. Sometimes there will even be like syntax error. And the way to solve this is either you find you use a more dedicated way of generating math functions. So I know there's a lot of other coding LLMs or like a way of generating code such that these can be insured, or you directly use the tools generated by the human experts. So, for example, SymPy and other like well-known Python libraries can be used to generate these reliable functions, which can be tested a lot. So yeah, just for conclusions, the whole paper is presenting a new way of doing LLM-centric reasonings or in general reasoning using tool-augmented approach. And they achieve remarkable results. So that's without argue. And there's some further direction to do. So I just mentioned a lot of limitation that we can work on. And also there are some directions to go for generating a much more practical, robust tool-augmented benchmark in order to assess this way of presenting reasoning over the data. And yeah, basically you need more people to annotate so you get better results, better data sets. Yeah, that's everything here from me. Thank you very much.